We're going to finish up Matthew chapter 5 today. We're going to finish up the Sermon on the Mount. And I had a lot of fun doing this, and I've had people come up to me and say that they've enjoyed it. And you don't like starting something and then not finishing, and people just feel like we should do the rest of it too. And then we had Christmas, right? We have to do Christmas. I can't do Sermon on the Mount through Christmas, where we have to do baby Jesus and angels and shepherds and all that. So we have to do that. So I just figure, well, we'll do Christmas, okay, and then we'll pick up Sermon on the Mount in January. And so we'll flip it a little bit, and we're gonna call it Refresh, okay, because we're starting a new year. And so we'll do that, and we'll think about Refresh and think about starting over, and we'll finish out the Sermon on the Mount for Matthew chapter 6 and 7. So that'll be coming up next year. This year, we're going to do something called Songs of the Season. And so not only has the choir been thinking about their songs of the season that they're going to do, but each Sunday in church, we'll look at a different Christmas hymn, and then we'll use that as our impetus for our sermon series. And then just to accompany that, on your way out, if you can remember, I have a holiday devotional for you, and so that is out in the lobby. And so I started writing this like 3 months ago. I haven't been working on it for 3 years like the choir has, but 3 months is good enough, right? And so I've been working on this since October. So there's a reading for every day through December to Christmas. So December 1st, you'd start. So you'd pick it up today, so you have it on December 1st. And then it'll take you to December 25th. And so those are out in the lobby in a little basket. Just grab one of those on your way out, and that is my holiday gift to you. We're going to be, like I said, in Matthew 5 right now. We're going to finish out starting at verse 38. It's kind of long, so I couldn't put the whole thing on the screen for you, so you're going to have to read in your own Bibles. Sorry. Jesus says, "You have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who begs from you, and do not refuse the one who would borrow from you. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and he sends rain on the just and on the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward will you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? You, therefore, must be perfect, as your heavenly Father is perfect." So the big picture that we get from this passage is, of course, Jesus' famous phrase, "turn the other cheek." What do you think? Are Christians a turn the other cheek people? It's a very hard teaching. Jesus also famously says to love your enemies. Very popular passage of Jesus. Does this describe us? Does this describe you? Do you have enemies? Do you love them? And so, as we've gone through this study, I think one thing has been pretty clear. God looks at the heart, right? God looks at the heart, not what we say, not what we do. God knows how we really feel. And so often what we see is God's way is not exactly my way. I might want to do it my way. I might like my way better, but God's way is different. And God knows that. He even admits that in the book of Isaiah. He says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." So the bottom line is, God doesn't think like we think, and his ways aren't like our ways. And that is especially true when it comes to loving your enemies. But loving our enemies, that's not a New Testament idea. This is not a Jesus idea. Even back in the Old Testament, God teaches this. In the book of Exodus, he tells his people, if you come across your enemy's ox or donkey wandering off, be sure to take it back to him. If you see the donkey of someone who hates you fallen down under its load, do not leave it there. Be sure you help him with it. In the book of Proverbs, it says, if your enemy is hungry, give him food to eat. If he is thirsty, give him water to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head, and the Lord will reward you. See, God has always wanted his people to love their enemies. But why? Well, Jesus gives us 3 examples of loving our enemies, and like we've seen so far in this sermon, I think Jesus' preaching is very reactionary. He sees something in the life of the people. He sees how they are living, and he sees what rules they've kind of made up and what things that they're following, and he kind of comes into that picture and he says, whoa. Who told you guys to do this? Who told you guys to live like this? You can't make up your own religion. You can't make up your own rules. You can't make up your own codes of conduct. And Jesus was against those who would take the scriptures and look for loopholes and ways to technically obey, but not really obey the heart of God. Jesus begins famously, once again, you have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I say to you. That's an eye for an eye, right? That was the first thing I thought of. What is an eye for an eye? What is that? Well, it's a code of conduct. It's for justice. So an eye for an eye ensues that people then don't get carried away with themselves. An eye for an eye keeps things fair. It stops riots and mobs. It stops people from taking revenge. And so an eye for an eye is established for when 2 friends go to court. It keeps things civil. And Jesus comes along and says, sure, that is a great way to treat your friends. It keeps everything fair. It keeps everything above board. But how do you treat your enemies? And Jesus gives us 3 different examples about how to treat our enemies. And first he says, if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other also. So what do you think? Do you think Christians are turn the other cheek people? Are Americans turn the other cheek people? Are Texans? Why do you guys laugh? That's because you're remembering. You're like, in Texas we have a saying, we don't start things, we finish them. No. Hey, Texans believe in turning the other cheek. We do, so long as the other cheek belongs to the other person. Right? Hey, back when I was a kid, I did not start fights, nor did I finish them. I was the kid who did not fight back. I was the kid who did not stand up for themselves. I was a huge target for bullies, and I had a few bullies up through 8th grade. I got beat up a few times, twice even by a girl. Not the same girl. And when you read Turn the Other Cheek, it feels like weakness, right? It feels like failure. It feels like droopy dog and woe is me. Jesus must not have lived in the real world, right? Turn the other cheek is not our natural reaction. What's your first reaction when somebody cuts you off? What's your first reaction when somebody flips you off? What's your first reaction when somebody gets promoted ahead of you? What's your first reaction when somebody cuts in line? Is Jesus saying that we should just let evil people run all over us? Do we just take it and then do nothing? A little tiny swivel cannon was mounted to a blockhouse in Gonzales, Texas, and later it was the object of all of Texas pride. And at the minor skirmish, known as the Battle of Gonzales, the first battle of the Texas Revolution against Mexico, a small group of Texans successfully resisted the Mexican forces. They had orders, the Mexicans, had orders from their colonel to seize our cannon and to take it back. And as a symbol of defiance, the Texans fashioned a flag. It had a black star, a picture of the cannon, along with the phrase, "Come and take it." Right? I love that story. But what about that story? What about violence? What about war? What about those who would come and take something from us? Turn the other cheek, love our enemies. I know there is always more going on in what Jesus is saying. So what's the context of this? What is Jesus really asking us to do? Because remember, Jesus says, if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other also. You know, Jesus has been speaking a lot to the Pharisees. And in this first chapter, he's been correcting all of their false teaching. He's been correcting all of their misconceptions. And Jesus says, if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, why is that important? Why wouldn't Jesus just say cheek? Why does he say the right cheek? Well, that's a good detail. It's a good detail to explore. Let's say you've gone to the Middle East, even recently. If you go to the Middle East, your right hand is your clean hand. This is the hand that you would use for writing, correspondence, shaking hands, hugging, okay? Your left hand is reserved for dirtier things, cleanup, wiping stuff. Okay? So if the right hand is my clean hand and I get hit in the right cheek, that means the person hit me with their left hand, right? Which is a no-no. If you're going to slap somebody, you slap them with your clean hand. You don't slap them with your dirty hand. So to slap somebody with your left hand, their soiled hand, is a massive insult. It's humiliating. It's degrading. It's not a slap in the face. You know, we think of it as a slap in the face. It's not a slap in the face. This is the F word. All right? This is not just something casual. And so Jesus says, if you turn the other cheek, and he's still going to use the same hand that he previously used, now my attacker is going to hit me where? Square in the face, right? I've basically just leaned into it. I've turned my face to look directly at him. And if he's going to continue to use that hand, I'm going to force him now to hit me in the face, which is against the law. You can slap somebody and probably get away with it, but it is against Jewish law to punch somebody in the face, just like you would think today. Today, we know that there's a difference between slapping somebody across the face and punching them square in the face, right? Jesus is not advocating for cowering. He is not saying that you should, whimper and hide. But the flip side of that is he's also not saying retaliate. He's not saying take revenge. He's actually giving you a third option. He's showing you a third door. It's a kingdom way. Do you invite more harm upon yourself? Yes. But you are now placing your offender in a very precarious position. Next, he says in verse 40, and if anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. This is not a random thing either. Jesus is not just pulling some random thing out of the air. If you go back to the Old Testament, in the book of Exodus, it says, if ever you take your neighbor's cloak in pledge, you shall return it to him before the sun goes down, for that is his only covering, and it is his cloak for his body. In what else shall he sleep? And if he cries out to me, I will hear, for I am compassionate. In the book of Deuteronomy, it says that if he is a poor man, you shall not sleep in his pledge. You shall restore to him the pledge as the sun sets, that he may sleep in his cloak and bless you, and it shall be righteous before you, before the Lord your God. So you can borrow somebody's cloak. You can borrow it, but only for a day. In other words, it's illegal. It's illegal for someone to sue you for your cloak. So Jesus says, if somebody sues you for what's legal, if somebody sues you for what they can take, then offer to them what they can't take. Offer to them what is illegal for them to have. Do you invite more harm on yourself? Yes. But you're now placing your offender in a very precarious position. Do they take it? Jesus says next, and if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Why would you force someone to go a mile? Why would you force anyone to go a mile? Is someone, what are you picturing? Is somebody in a running uniform just running up alongside you randomly and then they slap a big paper number on the back of you and they say, "You're now in the relay, go!" And you just got prompted to be in this spontaneous run. And remember I said my parents were here? You have to laugh at all my jokes. Otherwise, they're going to think I'm not funny. No, Jesus says you're forced, right? This is an inconvenience. This is an unreasonable demand. In the context of this has to do with the Roman army. So a Roman soldier, an imperial law, they could force a Jewish man or a Jewish boy to carry all of their gear. So basically, they could take their backpack off and their sword and their shield. They could carry off their burden, throw it on you, and they could make you carry it for a mile. Okay? Why 1 mile? Well, because after a mile, that person has to now turn around and go back home, right? So you have to allow them some time. How long are they going to be gone? They're going to walk a mile? They have to walk all the way back. So they figured a mile was reasonable. There are over 50,000 miles of Roman roads throughout the empire, and each mile had a stone marker, which were called guide stones. I actually have a picture of it. Joanna advances the slides. There you are. These guide stones, they pointed direction. So they also determined distance. They would warn you of dangers. And then on every single one of these stones, there was also the mileage to go back to Rome. And that's where we get the phrase, "all roads lead to Rome." The Roman mile was 1,000 paces. So it's 1,520 yards. A little shorter than our mile. And of course, most Jews, they're very detailed. So walk a mile, yep, not 1 inch past, right? I will walk right up to the marker, and I will not go beyond what is legal, what is required of me. And Jesus says, go 2. Now, remember, the Romans and the Jews, they don't like each other. They don't get along. The Jews are occupied people. And as you can imagine, this law to walk a mile would cause resentment among the Jews and the Romans. And for Jesus to say, go a second mile, that's shocking. First of all, nobody likes being forced to do anything. And second, we don't like to do other people's work, right? So I'm being forced to do somebody else's work? I don't like that. Jesus says, take the burden and carry it twice as long as anyone else. Again, Jesus is not advocating for coward. He's not saying to take retaliation. He's not saying to take revenge. He is proposing a third way, a kingdom way. Do you invite more harm on yourself? Yes. But you're now placing your offender in a very precarious position. What are they going to do now? How do they respond? And is that what Jesus is trying to teach us? That how we respond can actually affect our offender? That we could change our enemy? The Sermon on the Mount is for us, right? The Sermon on the Mount is for Christians. It's for Christ followers. Jesus is not speaking to our attacker. Jesus is not speaking to the person dragging us into court. Jesus is not speaking to the Roman soldier. Jesus is not concerned. Jesus is not concerned with how the world treats you. He is concerned with how you treat the world. And what is he saying? Who is your enemy? Your enemy is the one who takes from you. Your enemy is the one who takes what's yours. And Jesus says 3 times, if someone tries to take your dignity, your possessions, or even your time, I want you to do twice as much as what is expected. I want you to go beyond the rule. I want you to go beyond what's allowed. I want you to go beyond what the world comprehends. Jesus isn't just saying, love your enemies. He's saying, I want you to blow them away. Whatever they're expecting you to do, I want you to do something and just make them stop and short circuit. Do what they're not expecting. Jesus is changing what's always been done. he is proposing a third option. You see, the options before are submit or fight back. That's what we're used to. Submit or fight back. When you come across an enemy, your enemy expects you to submit or fight back. If a man comes up to you on the street and he holds out a gun and he says, your money or your life, he expects you to submit or fight back. What he's not expecting is for you to do something different. And Jesus says, choose door number 3. Choose the kingdom. The kingdom says, you reach out with your wallet or your purse in one hand, and then you offer your hand of friendship in the other. And you say, hey, my name's David. It's good to meet you. Is there anything else you need today besides money? Do you need shoes? Do you need a warm meal? Do you need a place to stay? Your enemy is not expecting more than what they're asking. Your enemy is not expecting twice as much. Your enemy is not expecting for you to make them your friend. Can you imagine if somebody ran up to you and says, your money or your life? And you say, all right, here's my wallet. Hey, by the way, my name's David. And he goes, Steve. Because that's your natural reaction, right? You say your name and you hold out your hand. That would just, bye. Yeah, I know his name. What is Jesus really saying about enemies? Is this lesson really about enemies? Or is this lesson about friendship? Because what do you think after reading this? Do you think Jesus would even want you to have an enemy? And there's a deeper teaching here, I think. If someone takes something from you by force, you are hurt, right? They take your money, your object, they take your dignity, they took your job, they took your respect, they took your time. We are impacted when people take from us. People who take from us are our enemies. Really? Are people that take things from you your enemies? My neighbor came over to my house and asked me for an egg. 1 egg. I gave it to her without blinking. Do you know why? Because my refrigerator is magical. There is an endless supply of eggs in there. I don't even know how it works. Like every morning when I make eggs for myself, magically they're replaced during the week. I don't know what goes on, but this box never runs out of food. Do you have a magic refrigerator at your house? Because I've never had to fill up my refrigerator once. It just, endless eggs just keep coming out of it over and over and over again. It's abundance. So I don't mind giving to my neighbor, but I thought people who take things from you are your enemies. What wouldn't you give a friend, though? I mean, what wouldn't you give your friend if your friend said, I need this? Hey, I need all the money you have in your wallet right now. What would you do? What wouldn't you do for your friends if they needed it? Wouldn't you give them everything they needed, everything they asked for? So you ask yourself, okay, what world do then I live in? Because the world would have you believe that all of the resources of the world are finite. They will run out. And so every day you should hoard everything that's yours. Put a big wide arm around all your stuff because people want to take your stuff and this is all yours. Money is limited, time is short, justice is blind. And that would be what the world would say. And Jesus comes along and says, you have heard it said, an eye for an eye. The world's resources are limited. Take what's yours. Hoard, control. It's you versus them. But I say there's kingdom resources. They're out there. And in my kingdom, there is an endless supply of dignity. There is an endless amount of coats in my closet. And in my kingdom, we live with an infinite amount of time. Jesus says, if someone takes something from you, give them more. Give them what you would give your friend. Why? Because none of us should have enemies. Because your life is blessed and your God will bless you. And if somebody takes something from you, he will give you more. Jesus says, you have kingdom resources. Someone wants to take your this or they want to take your that, you can either hoard it like it has value, or you can release it and realize that you live in God's kingdom and his resources are endless. Revelation 11 says the kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign how long? Forever. It all comes back to your heart, doesn't it? How do you think about your things and your stuff? We always say, my time is valuable. My time is valuable. Is it your time or is it his? Do you really need to protect what's yours? Is it really your responsibility to guard your life, your home, your family? We're all really struggling right now. This is tough because we really want to say yes, especially the men. We really want to. It's our job, right, men, to protect our home, our family. It's not wrong to feel that way. But where do you place your trust? Do you place it in your home security system? Do you place it in deadbolts all over the house? Do you place it in the shotgun that's in the shotgun safe? Or do you have trust in God that ultimately he protects you, that you're his child in his kingdom? It is his good pleasure to watch over you and to keep you safe. When the Bible is difficult like this, and I'm struggling with it, I just always imagine, okay, what would I do as a dad, right? What's natural for me? And so one of my children, they have a candy bar. And there's only one, right? And the other one wants it and says, hey, I want that. And the first one says, no, you can't have it. And the other one pushes the other one or punches them, right? That's how the world works. But as father, to watch this happen, if I'm going to watch over my children, one has a candy bar, and the other one says, hey, I want that. And the other one says, no, you can't have it. As father, I reach into my bag, and I pull out another candy bar, and I say, guys, I got two. And I give one to both of you, right? As father, you have an endless supply of candy bars, right? That's the fun thing about walking into the Five and Dime, and the little kid is staring at all the candy, and you just sidle up next to him and go, you know, one day when you're my age, you can buy all of this. You just won't want to. Okay, bye. Life is cruel. In my kingdom, every kid could have a candy bar. It's not that hard. My resources there are unlimited. It's real simple. Either it's all yours and you have to protect it, or it's all his and you just trust him. So what can you take home with you today? 1 Peter 3:9 says, do not repay evil for evil or reviling for reviling, but on the contrary, bless. For to this you are called, that you may obtain a blessing. Romans 12 says, do not be overcome by evil, but rather overcome evil with good. That's the answer. How do you overcome evil? With revenge? With retaliation? With cowering in a corner? Jesus didn't give you those options. Jesus says, no, there's another way. How do you overcome evil? With good, with love. You make your enemy into your friend. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, you want to read some really tough Christian stuff? Yeah. He says, evil will become powerless when it finds no opposing object. That's how you kill evil. That's how you defeat evil, with love. Isn't that how Jesus defeated evil on the cross? He could have retaliated, right? He could have taken revenge. He could have been on the cross, and with his will, he could have stopped the heart of every single person who had nailed him to that cross, right? Without even blinking. And Jesus chooses a third way. He gave his life freely. It wasn't taken from him. He gave his life. And he did more than what was expected. He forgave those who killed him. And he forgave the world for all time. Listen, if you are a Jesus follower, that means you are his message bearer and his image representative. He is your example. And don't let any message tell you that he was weak. Don't let anyone tell you that Jesus was a coward or that his life was taken from him.